Welcome back to HOA Neighbor Wars. She loved towing because it came with instant consequences. I am standing in my driveway in Tacoma at 6:45 in the morning, watching a tow truck back toward my car, and Laura Jackson is setting a little orange warning cone by my front wheel and screaming that the cone made the tow official. I am a network engineer who understands access logs and audit trails, and I know a setup when I see one. Laura is wearing her reflective vest, the one she wears every time she pretends to run enforcement for the Kingsbridge Terrace Association, and she is holding a clipboard like it is a weapon. "I am not debating you, I am issuing the notice," Laura shouts, and the tow driver climbs out of the cab, looking confused. "I have a guest parking pass on my dashboard," I say, pointing through the windshield. "It is right there." Laura does not even look. "That pass expired yesterday, and you know it." "The pass is good through the end of the month," I say. "I checked it this morning." The driver stops halfway to my car and glances at Laura. She waves him forward. "Hook it now, we will sort the paperwork later." The driver hesitates. I pull out my phone and open the photo I took 10 minutes ago. The one showing the pass with today's date clearly visible. I hold it up. Laura's face goes red. "You signed the covenants, now you live the covenants," Laura says, stepping closer. The tow is happening because I say it is happening. The driver looks at me, then at Laura, then back at me. "I need to see the pass myself," he says. Laura moves between him and my car. "We can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works." "That is not how it works," the driver says, and he walks around her. I unlock the car and pull the pass off the dashboard. The driver examines it, flips it over, checks the date stamp. "This is valid," he says to Laura. "I am not hooking this car." Laura's voice goes shrill. "You are under contract with the HOA. You do what I tell you." The driver shakes his head. "I am under contract to tow vehicles that violate the rules. This one does not." He climbs back into his truck and starts pulling forward, away from my car. Laura stands there with her mouth open, still holding the clipboard. The cone tips over and rolls into the gutter. I have been dealing with Laura Jackson and the Kingsbridge Terrace Association for 11 months. And this is not the first time she has tried to tow my car. It started the day my neighbor borrowed my driveway for a quick turnaround because his own driveway was blocked by a delivery truck. Laura saw it from her window and called it unauthorized access. She filed a violation notice that same afternoon, citing a rule about guest parking that does not apply to driveways. I appealed the notice with photos, timestamps, and a copy of the covenant section that explicitly allows temporary driveway use by residents. The board ignored my appeal and fined me $300. That was the moment I realized this was not about rules. It was about control. Laura runs the compliance hotline for the HOA, which means she is the one who decides what gets reported, what gets escalated, and what gets ignored. She writes herself into every enforcement action, and the management company rubber stamps whatever she sends them. The problem is that Laura does not like me, and I made the mistake of questioning her at a board meeting 6 months ago when she tried to charge me twice for the same guest parking decal. Now she is targeting me every chance she gets. Last month she claimed my car was parked too close to a fire hydrant, even though the hydrant is 40 feet away and I measured it. 2 weeks ago, she said my guest pass was displayed upside down, which is not a rule anywhere in the covenants. Every time I prove her wrong, she escalates. The problem is that I have a medical appointment scheduled in 3 weeks, a specialist consult that took me 4 months to book, and rescheduling would take another 4 months minimum. If Laura manages to tow my car or hit me with enough fines to drain my checking account, I am going to miss that appointment. So I started building a paper trail. Every notice Laura sends me, I respond in writing with certified mail receipts. Every phone call with the management company, I follow up with an email summarizing what was said. Every rule Laura claims I violated, I look up in the covenants and print the actual text. I have been doing this for 6 months, and the folder on my kitchen counter is 3 inches thick. Laura has no idea, because she thinks I am just another homeowner who will eventually give up and pay the fines. She is wrong. The morning after the failed tow attempt, I get an email from the management company. It says the board is scheduling a hearing to discuss my repeated violations, and I need to confirm my attendance within 48 hours or the hearing will proceed without me. The email does not specify what violations they are talking about, and it does not include any of the documentation I submitted. I forward the email to my neighbor, the one who borrowed my driveway, and he confirms he got the same email. He tells me Laura has been calling him non-stop, demanding he admit he violated the guest parking rules. I call the management company and ask for a list of the violations they plan to discuss at the hearing. The woman on the phone says she will have to check with Laura, because Laura is the records custodian and she controls access to all enforcement files. I ask when I can expect a response. The woman says it could take up to 10 business days, and there may be a fee for copying the records. I tell her the hearing is in 6 days, and she says that is not her problem. This is how the HOA works. They set a hearing date before you have access to the evidence. Then they claim you had plenty of time to prepare. It is a trap, and Laura knows it. But I have been keeping my own records, and I have something Laura does not know about. 3 weeks ago, I recorded a phone call with the tow company. I live in Washington, which is a 2-party consent state, so I told the dispatcher at the start of the call that I was recording. She said fine. During that call, I asked if the HOA had filed the proper paperwork for the tow attempt in my driveway. The dispatcher checked the system and said no. There was no work order on file. She said Laura had called and asked for a tow without submitting any documentation, and the driver was sent based on Laura's verbal authorization alone. That recording is my trump card. I am not going to mention it in any of my pre-hearing emails, and I am not going to bring it up during the hearing unless I need to. I let the management company send me their vague, incomplete notice, and I respond with a polite confirmation that I will attend. I do not ask for the records again. I do not complain about the short timeline. I just confirm, and I wait. 2 days before the hearing, Laura shows up at my house. She is wearing the reflective vest even though it is almost dark outside, and she is holding a piece of chalk. She walks around my car twice, then marks my front tire with a thick white line. She takes a photo of the mark with her phone, then walks back to her car without saying a word. I watch from my window, and I take my own photos of her marking my tire, including a shot that clearly shows her face and the chalk in her hand. The next morning, Laura sends an email to the entire neighborhood through the HOA group chat. The email says there has been an increase in unauthorized overnight parking, and the board is cracking down. It says any vehicle parked in the same spot for more than 24 hours will be considered abandoned and subject to towing. The email does not mention me by name, but everyone knows who it is about. My neighbor, the one who sits near the front at meetings and records everything, texts me a screenshot of the email and asks if I am okay. I tell him I am fine, and I ask if he is still planning to come to the hearing. He says yes, and he is bringing his laptop. The hearing is scheduled for 7 in the evening at the clubhouse near the neighborhood entrance. I arrive at 6:50 with my folder, my laptop, and a thumb drive containing the recorded phone call. My neighbor is already there, sitting in the second row with his laptop open. Laura is at the front table with 2 other board members, and she is wearing the reflective vest. The management company representative is sitting off to the side looking at her phone. There are about 15 other residents in the room, most of them looking confused about why they are here. If you are enjoying this chaos, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA nightmare stories. The board president calls the meeting to order and says they are here to discuss ongoing compliance issues with multiple homeowners. He does not say my name, but Laura is staring directly at me. The president says they are going to go through each case one at a time, and homeowners will have a chance to respond after the board presents the evidence. He starts with a different homeowner, someone I do not recognize, and Laura reads off a list of alleged violations. The homeowner tries to respond, but the president cuts him off and says he can speak after the board is done. The homeowner sits down, looking frustrated. This goes on for 3 more cases. Each time, Laura reads a list of violations, the president says the homeowner will have a chance to respond, and then they move on to the next case without letting anyone speak. By the time they get to me, it is clear this is not a hearing. It is a sentencing. Laura stands up and says I have been in violation of guest parking rules for 11 consecutive months. She says I have repeatedly displayed expired passes, parked in unauthorized areas, and allowed non-residents to use my driveway without permission. She says the board has been patient, but my behavior has escalated to the point where enforcement action is necessary. She does not show any photos, any documentation, or any proof. She just reads from a sheet of paper, and the president nods along. When she finishes, the president looks at me and says I have 2 minutes to respond. I stand up and pull out my folder. I start by holding up the guest parking pass that was on my dashboard the morning Laura tried to tow my car. I explain that the pass was valid, and I have photos proving it. Laura interrupts and says the pass was issued incorrectly, and it should have been revoked. I ask who issued the pass. She says the management company did. I ask if the management company has the authority to revoke passes without notice. She does not answer. I move on to the driveway incident. I pull out the photos showing my neighbor's truck in my driveway, along with the covenant section that allows temporary driveway use. I explain that Laura filed a violation notice the same day, even though the covenant clearly permits what happened. Laura interrupts again and says the covenant does not apply when the use causes a disruption. I ask what disruption occurred. She says it disrupted the flow of traffic. I point out that my driveway is at the end of a cul-de-sac, and there is no through traffic. She does not respond. I move on to the chalk marks on my tire. I pull out the photos showing Laura marking my tire, and I explain that she did it 2 days ago. I ask if there is a rule about how long a car can be parked in its own driveway. Laura says the rule is about abandoned vehicles, and my car appeared abandoned because it had not moved in 24 hours. I ask if she knocked on my door or called me before marking my tire. She says she did not need to, because the rule is clear. I pull out my phone and show the timestamp on my Ring doorbell footage, which shows my car leaving the driveway at 6:30 in the morning, 2 hours before Laura marked the tire. Laura's face goes red. The president cuts me off and says my 2 minutes are up. I say I have more evidence. He says I can submit it in writing after the meeting. I say the hearing notice said I would have a chance to present my case, and I am not done. He says the board has heard enough, and they will deliberate and send me their decision. I stay standing. My neighbor in the second row raises his hand and says he has a question. The president ignores him. I let the meeting move on, because my move was not a speech, it was a document. The president says the board will take a 10-minute recess to discuss the cases, and everyone should stay in their seats. Laura stands up and walks toward the back of the room, pulling out her phone. My neighbor leans over and whispers that he recorded the whole thing. I nod. The management company representative is still looking at her phone, completely disengaged. During the recess, I walk over to my neighbor and ask if he caught the part where Laura said the pass was issued incorrectly. He nods and shows me the recording on his laptop. The audio is clear and Laura's voice is unmistakable. I ask if he can send me a copy. He says he already did, and it is in my email. The board comes back after 15 minutes, not 10. The president sits down and says the board has reviewed all the cases and they have reached a decision. He starts with the other homeowners first, and in every case, the decision is the same. The violations are upheld, and the fines are due within 30 days. When he gets to me, he says the board finds that I have repeatedly violated guest parking rules, and I am being fined $900. He says if I do not pay within 30 days, the HOA will place a lien on my property. I stand up and say I am appealing the decision. The president says I can submit an appeal in writing, and the board will review it at the next meeting. I say I want to submit evidence now. He says the meeting is over. I say I have a recorded phone call that proves Laura requested a tow without proper authorization, and I am submitting it as a formal exhibit. I pull out the thumb drive and hold it up. The room goes silent. Laura stands up fast enough that her chair tips over. That is inadmissible, she says. You cannot record private phone calls. I told the dispatcher I was recording, I say. She consented. Washington is a two-party consent state, and I followed the law. The president looks at the management company representative, who finally looks up from her phone. The representative asks, "What is on the recording?" I say it is a call with the tow company, where the dispatcher confirms that Laura requested a tow without filing a work order or submitting any documentation. I say the dispatcher also confirmed that the driver was sent based solely on Laura's verbal authorization, which violates the HOA's contract with the tow company. Laura is shaking her head. That is not what happened. I walk to the front of the room and hand the thumb drive to the management company representative. Play it, I say. The representative hesitates, then plugs the thumb drive into her laptop. She plays the recording. The audio is clear. My voice asking about the work order, the dispatcher checking the system, the dispatcher saying there is no work order on file, the dispatcher confirming that Laura called and requested the tow verbally. When the recording ends, the room is completely silent. Laura is staring at the table. The president is staring at Laura. The management company representative is staring at her laptop. My neighbor in the second row is grinning. The president clears his throat and says the board needs to discuss this new evidence. He calls another recess. Laura does not move. The other board members stand up and walk into the hallway. The management company representative follows them. I sit back down. My neighbor leans over and whispers that this is the best meeting he has ever been to. After 10 minutes, the board comes back. The president sits down and says the board has decided to table my case pending further investigation. He says the fine is suspended until the investigation is complete, and I will be notified of the results in writing. He does not look at Laura. Laura is still staring at the table. The president adjourns the meeting, and everyone starts filing out. I walk over to my neighbor and thank him for recording. He says he is going to post his recording on the neighborhood group chat, and he bets everyone is going to want to see it. I tell him to wait a few days, because I have a feeling the board is going to act fast once they realize how much liability Laura just created. I am right. 2 days later, I get an email from the management company. The email says the board has completed its investigation, and they have determined that the compliance hotline was being used inappropriately. The email says Laura Jackson is being removed from her role as records custodian, and all pending enforcement actions initiated by her are being reviewed. The email says my fine has been canceled, and I will receive a refund for any previous fines I paid related to guest parking. The email does not say anything about what happens to Laura, but I hear from my neighbor that she resigned from the board the same day. But it does not stop there. 3 days after the email, the board schedules an emergency meeting to discuss the management company. My neighbor texts me and says I should come, because it is going to be good. I show up, and the room is packed. Residents are standing in the back because there are not enough chairs. The board president starts the meeting by saying they have received multiple complaints about the management company's handling of enforcement actions, and they are going to address those complaints tonight. The first complaint is from the homeowner who was fined at the same hearing as me. He says he paid his fine, but the management company never sent him a receipt, and when he asked for one, they said he had to pay a processing fee to get it. The second complaint is from another homeowner who says the management company charged him for copying records, but the records they sent him were incomplete and some pages were missing. The third complaint is from my neighbor, who says the management company repeatedly ignored his emails asking about Laura's enforcement actions, and he suspects they were covering for her. The president listens to all the complaints, then says the board has been reviewing the management company's contract, and they have found several issues. He says the contract allows the management company to charge fees for records requests, but the fees they are charging are significantly higher than what the contract allows. He says the contract requires the management company to respond to homeowner inquiries within 5 business days, but many homeowners have been waiting weeks or months for responses. He says the contract requires the management company to maintain accurate records of all enforcement actions, but the records they have provided to the board are incomplete and inconsistent. Then he drops the bomb. He says the board has been conducting a budget review, and they have discovered that the management company has been paying the tow company significantly more than the contract rate. He says the tow company is supposed to charge a flat fee per tow, but the invoices show additional fees for fuel surcharges, equipment fees, and administrative costs that are not in the contract. He says the board suspects the management company has been approving these extra fees without authorization, and they believe this is connected to Laura's relationship with the tow company. The president says the board is terminating the management company's contract effective immediately, and they are hiring an interim management company to take over while they search for a permanent replacement. He says the interim company will conduct a full audit of all enforcement actions from the past 2 years, and any fines or fees that were improperly charged will be refunded. He says the board is also suspending all enforcement actions until the audit is complete, and homeowners will not be charged any new fines during that time. The room erupts in applause. My neighbor is clapping so hard his laptop almost falls off his lap. The board president waits for the applause to die down, then says there is one more thing. He says the board has reviewed the recording I submitted at the previous hearing, and they have determined that Laura Jackson violated the HOA's code of conduct by requesting a tow without proper authorization. He says the minutes will record the reversal and the reason, and Laura's actions will be noted in the official record. He says Laura has been asked to resign from the board, and she has agreed. But he is not done. He says the board has also reviewed the other enforcement actions Laura initiated, and they have found a pattern of selective enforcement. He says Laura targeted certain homeowners while ignoring similar violations by others, and in some cases, she fabricated violations that did not exist. He says the board is issuing formal apologies to all homeowners who were targeted by Laura, and they are refunding all fines related to those cases. Then he says the board has contacted the tow company, and the tow company has agreed to terminate its contract with the HOA. He says the tow company admitted that Laura had been calling them directly and requesting tows without submitting work orders, and the tow company had been charging extra fees because Laura had promised them the HOA would pay. He says the tow driver who came to my driveway has confirmed that Laura told him to hook my car first and ask questions later, and the driver refused because he knew it was wrong. The president finishes by saying the board is implementing new policies to prevent this from happening again. He says all enforcement actions will now require approval from at least 2 board members, and all tow requests must be submitted in writing with photographic evidence. He says the board is also creating a homeowner appeals process that will be handled by an independent third party, not by the board or the management company. He says the new policies will be voted on at the next meeting, and homeowners are encouraged to attend and provide feedback. The meeting ends, and people start filing out. My neighbor walks over and says he cannot believe it. He says he has been living in this neighborhood for 8 years, and this is the first time he has seen the board actually hold someone accountable. He says he is going to post his recording on the group chat tonight, and he thinks it is going to be the most watched video in the history of the HOA. I tell him I am just glad it is over. He laughs and says it is not over yet, because Laura is probably going to appeal or try to spin this somehow. I say I do not think she can spin this, because the evidence is too clear. He says I am probably right, but he is going to keep recording just in case. The next morning, I get an email from the interim management company. The email says they have reviewed my file, and they have determined that all fines related to guest parking have been canceled. The email says I will receive a refund check within 30 days, and the refund will include all fines I paid, plus interest. The email also says they have removed all enforcement notices from my file, and my account is now in good standing. 2 weeks later, I get the refund check. It is for $1,200, which is more than I expected. I open the envelope and see a letter explaining the refund. The letter says the interim management company conducted a full audit of Laura's enforcement actions, and they found that I was charged multiple duplicate fines for the same violation. The letter says the extra fines were added to my account without my knowledge, and the management company never sent me notices. The letter apologizes for the error and says the interim management company is committed to transparency and accuracy. I cash the check and use part of it to take my neighbor out to dinner. He brings his laptop and shows me the video he posted on the group chat. The video has over 200 views, which is impressive considering the neighborhood only has about 150 homes. He says people have been sharing it outside the neighborhood, and he has gotten messages from people in other HOAs asking for advice on how to fight back against bad boards. I tell him the best advice I can give is to keep records. Every email, every notice, every phone call, every meeting. Document everything, and do not assume the board is acting in good faith. He says he has been doing that for years, and it is the only reason he survived Laura's reign of terror. He says there were times when he wanted to move, but he could not afford to sell his house at a loss, so he stayed and fought. He says he is glad he did, because now the neighborhood has a chance to fix itself. A month later, the board holds a meeting to vote on the new enforcement policies. I attend, and so does my neighbor. The room is full again, but this time the energy is different. People are smiling, talking to each other, asking questions. The board president presents the new policies, and they are exactly what he promised. 2 board member approval for enforcement actions, written tow requests with photographic evidence, an independent appeals process. The board votes unanimously to adopt the policies, and the room applauds. After the meeting, I talk to the board president. He thanks me for bringing the recording to the hearing, and he says it was the push the board needed to take action. He says Laura had been running the compliance hotline for 3 years, and no one had ever challenged her because she made it so difficult to access records. He says the board knew there were problems, but they did not have proof until I provided it. He says the new policies are designed to prevent anyone from having that much control again. I ask what happened to Laura. He says she resigned from the board and moved out of the neighborhood 2 weeks ago. He says she did not give a reason, but he suspects she knew the interim management company was going to find more problems if she stayed. He says the audit is still ongoing, and they are finding more duplicate fines and unauthorized charges in other homeowners' accounts. He says the total refunds are going to be over $50,000. 3 months later, I get another email from the interim management company. The email says the audit is complete, and the final report will be presented at the next board meeting. The email says the audit found systemic issues with the previous management company's record-keeping, billing, and enforcement practices. The email says the interim management company is recommending that the board adopt additional transparency measures, including publishing all enforcement actions in a monthly newsletter, and creating an online portal where homeowners can access their account information at any time. I attend the meeting where the report is presented. The interim management company representative walks through the findings, and they are damning. The previous management company charged over $75,000 in unauthorized fees over a 3-year period. They failed to respond to over 200 homeowner inquiries. They allowed Laura to initiate enforcement actions without board approval in over 100 cases. They paid the tow company over $20,000 in extra fees that were not in the contract. The representative says the board has grounds to sue the previous management company for breach of contract, and they are working with an attorney to determine the best course of action. She says the board is also working with the tow company to recover the extra fees, and the tow company has agreed to refund the money because they do not want to be associated with the scandal. The board votes unanimously to adopt the transparency measures, and they also vote to hire the interim management company as the permanent management company. The representative says they are honored to serve the community, and they are committed to rebuilding trust. After the meeting, my neighbor tells me he heard Laura is trying to get on the board of another HOA in a different city. He says he is tempted to reach out to that HOA and warn them, but he does not know if it is worth the effort. I tell him it is definitely worth the effort, because people like Laura do not change, they just move to a new place and start over. He says he will think about it. 6 months after the original hearing, the new board holds an election. My neighbor runs for a seat, and he wins by a landslide. He says the first thing he is going to do is make sure the enforcement policies are actually being followed, and the second thing he is going to do is push for more community events so people feel like the HOA is working for them, not against them. He says the neighborhood has been through a lot, and it is going to take time to heal, but he thinks they can do it. I run into the board president a few weeks after the election, and he tells me the lawsuit against the previous management company is moving forward. He says the attorney thinks they have a strong case, and the management company is already trying to settle. He says the settlement would cover the unauthorized fees, plus damages, and the board is considering using the money to fund community improvements like a new playground and updated landscaping. He says it would be a good way to turn something negative into something positive. I tell him I think that is a great idea. He says he could not have done any of this without my recording, and he is grateful I had the guts to stand up to Laura. I say I was just protecting myself, and I did not expect it to turn into a full audit and a management company change. He laughs and says sometimes one person standing up is all it takes to start a chain reaction. I make my medical appointment, and it goes well. The specialist gives me a treatment plan that is going to take a few months, but it is manageable. I am relieved, because missing that appointment would have set me back another 4 months, and I do not know if I could have handled that on top of the HOA drama. I send a thank you text to my neighbor, because if he had not shown up at that hearing with his laptop and his willingness to record everything, I might have lost. A year after the original hearing, the neighborhood has changed. The new management company is responsive, the new board is transparent, and people actually show up to meetings because they trust the process. Laura's name is never mentioned, but everyone remembers what happened, and it serves as a reminder of what can go wrong when one person has too much power and no accountability. I still keep my folder of documents on my kitchen counter, just in case. My neighbor still records every meeting, just in case. We both know that the fight is never really over, because HOAs are designed to give a small group of people control over a large group of people, and that dynamic is always going to create conflict. But we also know that if you keep records, stay calm, and use the system against itself, you can win. You just have to be willing to stand up and fight. Take care, and thanks for watching.